Let's see if we can get that. What's up, everybody? You guys have made it just in the nick of crime. It has been quite a busy day for me. I was wanting to get you guys initially a midday recap, which I should be able to do tomorrow, but I had a very big meeting today, which I cannot share details with you guys about yet. But let's just say something very big is probably coming very soon, and I'm going to leave it at that for the moment. So I didn't get home till this afternoon and then had to quickly put this show together. But don't worry, we still did it thoroughly. Quickly put this show together to come back out and tell you guys about it before we go live with the Menendez brothers' cousin / family spokesperson in about an hour from now, from the time that I'm recording this live. So if you do want to see that and you are watching this from Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube, that live is going to be on TikTok exclusively. But if you want to catch it on the replay, I will likely upload it to YouTube. And I'll probably try to see if we can do another version with Anna Maria Baralt, where we come on and we broadcast on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, and Facebook as well. Now, getting into today's notes, if you can't stay for the entire thing, please know that, again, this is recorded. It is on YouTube. It's in the Sean Diddy Combs playlist, or should be. It will be. And then I'll also do a Substack for this as well. Now, without further ado, let's just kind of get right into it. So what we kind of had happen today, with this trial, is you had Deontay Nash that was still on, coming from yesterday from Cross, and he eventually finished. And the witness that is being known as Mia took the stand, and she's expected to go all the way through at least the end of tomorrow. And it's pretty explosive testimony, right? So let's just get in it. We'll finish up with Deontay's stuff, and then we'll get right into this stuff with Mia. So if you guys don't remember Deontay Nash or any of the testimony, please go back and watch yesterday's show or read yesterday's Substack notes, and you'll kind of have the idea of that. So, but according to Deontay, Cassie discovered that in 2015, Combs had been unfaithful to her while she was overseas filming a movie in South Africa. Nash said that once Cassie learned about the alleged infidelity, she was devastated. She reached out to him in anger and heartbreak, asking, "Why does he keep humiliating me and trying to ruin my career?" At that point, Nash and Cassie and Combs had broken up. Wanting to kind of help lift her up a little bit, Nash decided to introduce her to someone new. And that someone was none other than a name that we have heard multiple times kind of come up in conversation, Michael B. Jordan. So Deontay Nash is the one who made that introduction, made that hookup, right? When asked on the stand by Diddy's defense attorney whether he had set Cassie up with Michael, Nash confirmed it with zero hesitation. He said, "Indeed, he fine, she fine, why not?" Nash told jurors the two began talking, dating, getting to know each other a little bit more so. Though he did not offer specifics about how long the relationship lasted or how serious it became, the implication was clear that Cassie had begun exploring new possibilities just as her relationship with Combs appeared to be completely unraveling. Now, the courtroom revelation didn't end there, though. Nash also confirmed that Cassie later dated former NFL linebacker Andre Branch. This relationship began around 2017 while Branch was playing for the Miami Dolphins. Now, these new details add another dimension of the timeline of Cassie's turbulent and highly publicized relationship with Sean Combs, which obviously, as we know, is very central to the prosecution, their case for, the trafficking, coercion, and abuse. The relationships that Cassie pursued in the aftermath of that alleged abuse not only reflect her attempts to move forward, but it also sheds light on just how much she was trying to escape. In another revealing moment, though, Deontay Nash gave jurors an inside look at the emotional complexity and private frustrations that marked Cassie's relationship with Diddy. According to Nash, Cassie, quote, wasn't impressed, end quote, with one of Combs' side chicks, a woman now known in court under the pseudonym Gina. This testimony serves as part of a broader line of questioning from Diddy's attorney, Xavier Donaldson, who challenged Nash about Cassie's past flings and the rocky nature of her long-term on and off relationship with Diddy. Nash also testified that Cassie, while aware of Diddy's involvement with Gina, would occasionally encourage others in the circle to go out with her, more out of detachment than warmth. He said, quote, "She would tell us to take Gina to Nobu or Tuscanova. That's referring to basically trendy LA hotspots. but the undertone was clear. Cassie didn't consider Gina a threat or even particularly interesting. The woman that's been referred to as Gina is more than a footnote, though, because she is one of the alleged victims that's named in the government's indictments, and she originally was expected to testify. She is the one who has now declined to take the stand, which has drawn a little bit of scrutiny given her central role. But I still think even her choosing to not testify still speaks volumes. That's my personal opinion. Now, the tone that was going on with this cross-examination between Donaldson and Nash was described as being gossipy. And that kind of shifted a little bit when defense turned the spotlight on Cassie's own romantic life. Donaldson then pressed Nash on Cassie's relationships outside of Combs, including a confirmed romance with NFL linebacker Andre Branch, and then an unnamed NBA player referred to in the court only as Brandon. Still, the takeaway from this line of testimony wasn't just about the names that were being dropped here. It highlights the emotional kind of chess match that was going on behind the scenes. Basically, a young woman caught in an unequal, often manipulative relationship with one of the most powerful men in entertainment. Whether mocking her partner's infidelity or seeking affection elsewhere, Cassie's actions, as described by Nash, kind of painted a picture of someone trying to assert control in a dynamic where she often had none. So she was able to control her aspects of life in these particular regards, where with Diddy, she wasn't able to do so. That's kind of what was going on. Now, from here, Deontay is done, and he's off the stand. We're done hearing from him. And Mia comes in, and Mia is promised to be a pretty explosive testimony, right? So basically, the public might not ever know what it looks like until we not know who she is, and we don't know who she is. But she's being referred to in court only as Mia. She's testifying under a pseudonym in order to protect her identity as an alleged survivor of SA. As she took the stand, the judge issued a firm warning to both the press and members of the gallery, saying, quote, this is what the judge said, saying, quote, there will be no documentation of the witness in any way, shape, or form. Instructing the courtroom not to take notes, sketches, or descriptions of her appearance. His directive extended to journalists, court sketch artists, and anyone else who was observing the trial. The judge emphasized that these restrictions were put in place specifically to shield the witness's identity from public exposure, which is a common but notable measure in cases involving survivors of alleged S crimes. Now, the introduction of Mia marks a significant turn in the trial, which has so far featured high-profile testimony from individuals who worked closely with Diddy or were even present during alleged acts of violence, coercion, or manipulation. Now, Mia is expected to provide firsthand insight into some of the most serious allegations at the heart of the prosecution's case. So, Mia, when she's got on the stand, described what she called a chaotic and toxic environment while working for Diddy. She was one of his former assistants, just so you guys have a little bit of background there. And she said that basically it was an environment that she said included physical violence, intimidation, and SA. She said, quote, it was chaotic. It was toxic. It could be exciting. The highs were really high and the lows were really, really low. She spoke in a quiet tone and staring down at the witness stand for much of her testimony, basically like just looking down kind of like this. She offered jurors kind of a raw, unflinching account of her experience working closely with Diddy. Her voice was subdued. Her voice was described as being subdued. She avoided eye contact with anyone in the courtroom. And remember, this is the one who her attorney's like, she is really nervous. She's about to have a breakdown. She's very anxious about this. So she's doing this. She doesn't want to be there, but she knows she needs to be there. But Mia also told the court that Diddy subjected her to repeated physical violence, saying, quote, he's thrown things at me. He's thrown me against the wall. He's thrown me into a pool. He's thrown an ice bucket on my head. He slammed my arm into a door, and he's also assaulted me. Now, these admissions came during direct examination by Assistant U.S. Attorney Madison Schmeiser. Mia appeared more at ease when discussing her professional background, occasionally making eye contact with the prosecutor as she responded to questions about her career before her time in Combs' orbit. Now, Diddy was seated between his defense attorneys. Today, he was wearing a tan sweater. I haven't talked about what he was wearing lately. A tan sweater over a white button-down shirt. And according to courtroom observers, he kept his hands folded in his lap as Mia described the violence and abuse she endured under his employment. Her testimony is one of the most direct and harrowing personal accounts that's been presented in the trial. And like I said, the courtroom has her under strict measures. So now let's keep going more. Because Mike Myers' name came up again, and Georgina Chapman. But again, before we all jump to conclusions, let's talk about why. So, before she worked for Diddy, she told the court that she had been employed previously by 2 high-profile celebrities. Her first job was working with Georgina Chapman, who is a fashion designer and co-founder of the fashion luxury brand Marchesa. Sorry, I don't know if I'm saying it wrong. She was also famously married to Harvey Weinstein. After that, she went on to serve as the personal assistant to Mike Myers. Wayne's World, Austin Powers, that Mike Myers. Now, following these positions in the fashion and entertainment world, she began working for Combs in 2009, launching what would become an 8-year employment period that she now describes as toxic, chaotic, and ultimately traumatic. Now, her tenure with Diddy and Bad Boy Entertainment lasted from 2009 to 2017. Now, earlier in her testimony, she detailed the alleged abuse she endured while working closely with Diddy. Like I said, being thrown against the wall, slammed into a door, doused with an ice bucket, essayed. Her appearance was saying her appearance in court was tightly controlled. The judge, of course, issued the warning. Sorry, some of this is kind of a repeat in an effort to protect her. Told her I threw this together really quickly, so there might be some stuff that I didn't get a chance to like duplicates, weed them out. So Mia's personal background, including her work for widely recognized public figures, serves to kind of show how far-reaching his alleged behavior was and how someone with an established career in elite celebrity circles could still be subject to coercion, violence, and control. That's, again, a big part of this. Domestic violence has been at the heart of a lot of this testimony. However, this is not a DV trial. But what the point of this is, by people talking about the violence outside of just Cassie, is Cassie was one of the biggest ones who saw it from a personal and professional perspective. But so are all of these other people who worked for him. And this is where that racketeering, that RICO charge starts to kind of become built. These are the building blocks of that. Now, in another moment that she talked about, she testified that Diddy at one time greeted her in his underwear during a job interview. That basically this took place at his personal apartment where Vashta Wilson, who was the head of human resources at Bad Boy Records, brought Mia in for what she believed would be a professional interview for an assistant position. Instead, when they arrived, Combs opened the door half naked and talking on the phone. According to Mia's testimony, Wilson left her alone in the apartment with Combs despite the inappropriate setting and his state of undress. The situation, according to Mia, or what she implied, was treated as completely normal within the culture of Combs' team. Mia then told the court that Combs eventually put on his clothes and continued the interview. His celebrity stylist was also present in the apartment during the conversation, though the testimony did not clarify whether any discomfort was acknowledged or addressed. While seemingly minor compared to some of the more severe allegations of physical and SA that she testified about, this incident kind of shows what she describes as that toxic and chaotic work environment, where boundaries are kind of blurred from the very beginning, from the moment she walked in, and professionalism was undermined by Diddy's unchecked power. Now, this alleged encounter was introduced during her testimony, highlights what prosecutors are arguing is a long-standing pattern of exploitation, entitlement, and misconduct. We talked about that. Okay, so we talked about that. Then she testified about the fact that she worked round the clock for him, once going 5 days, 5 full days without sleep. She said she would take her extra strength ADHD medication to help her stay awake for her never ending shifts, which eventually led to a breakdown. She said she had a physical breakdown. I remember my hearing went. I felt like I was underwater. My equilibrium was off. She said she had blurred vision and she saw lights that weren't there. I burst into tears, hysterical, and I couldn't stop crying. Combs finally allowed her to go sleep after that meltdown. Going a little bit more into that. Let's see if I missed anything here. After this complete collapse that allowed her to sleep. Now, that same lack of control extended to her physical privacy as well. She testified that during the year she lived in Combs' home, because she had to be with him pretty much 24/7 as his assistant, beginning around 2009, 2010, and she was explicitly forbidden from locking her bedroom door. He told me, "This is my house. No one locks their doors." While she was not allowed to secure her personal space, Combs' male live-in security guards had full access to locks and security measures. One had a deadbolt. Another had a keypad where a camera was. She described her room not as a safe place, but as a space where she was constantly vulnerable, which is a theme that she had that basically echoed throughout her entire testimony about physical abuse, intimidation, and violation. She said it was his house. I was just staying in it. Her testimony was delivered very softly, without eye contact, and that again continues to help the prosecution to shape that narrative, which is at the center of this. That he used control, dehumanized her, and abused people all behind the walls of bad boy entertainment and by luxury events and settings, and he continued to abuse and hurt people. Then they start talking a little bit more about Mia starts talking more about the stuff with Cassie, and she reiterates what we've heard a lot of, which is the fact that when Diddy became upset with Cassie, he would routinely take away things that he had given her, including her car, jewelry, and financial support. We have heard that same sentiment reiterated by multiple people, by every assistant of his so far, has said that same thing. Friends of people who are former friends of Cassie's have said the same things, and Cassie said the same thing, that he would punish her like she was a little child. Now, that exchange came from direct questioning from the prosecution, who asked Mia directly whether Combs would ever revoke things he provided for Ventura, and she said Mia's response was all the time. She further testified how the company was the entity paying for Cassie's homes and cars, and showing just how dependent Ventura's financial stability was on his approval. This level of control, Mia said, wasn't limited to material items. He allegedly held full control over her music and acting career as well, from what she released to how she appeared publicly. The testimony, again, aligns with the same themes that we've heard from so many other people, and from the same themes that the prosecution is trying to prove, which is that whole trafficking and racketeering, that money, power, emotional manipulation were tools that he would use to exert total control over the women in his life in general, but particularly Cassie, because from what we've heard, basically none of the men, they might have experienced some physical violence, but none of the men experienced things like what Mia, what Cassie, and what other women in his circle were describing. And this, again, is not the first time this has been brought up, right? We've talked about this a lot. Then Mia starts talking about an alleged incident where she had to hide and cry behind a bush, was hiding and crying behind a bush. She said that this incident occurred around 2009, 2010, at the home in LA. Mia told the jury that she didn't see the actual assault, but heard it, and what followed left a lasting impression. That she remembered upstairs hearing loud thuds, like something was hitting a wall. Then she witnessed a disturbing scene, suitcases being thrown over the interior foyer from the second floor, which kind of describes an explosive, impulsive rage and chaos inside the house. What Mia saw next was even more troubling. After the sounds of the fight and the flung luggage, she found Cassie hiding and crying and shaking behind a bush. Mia said that when she tried to approach her, Cassie made the gesture indicating for her to stay silent and walk away. Mia obeyed and left without telling anyone where Cassie was. The moment was brief, but to Mia, it was very powerful, showing Cassie physically and emotionally distressed, concealing herself outside the mansion, and silently pleading with a friend not to intervene. A choice that, shows kind of what Cassie was up against. And again, it also shows kind of what happened here. A lot of people, I had somebody make a comment yesterday, and I did a video, not as a clapback to be mean, but to kind of just show, like, this is the type of control. If you've never been in a situation where you're dealing with somebody with this type of violence, we have the gift of hindsight saying, well, I would just leave. I wouldn't do this. Why didn't somebody call? Because Diddy threatened everyone, and he threatened them with his life, with their lives. That's part of it, So anyways, I was looking at the comment over there real quick. Yeah, somebody said Stockholm syndrome is part of it too. But I think for this one, real quick, and I'll say this, I think this is so much more than just Stockholm syndrome, because, Stockholm syndrome, like if it was like an average person, like a regular non-celebrity person, that's hard enough to leave. People who have, modest means, even little means, financially speaking, they can't leave. This is somebody who controlled everything. And then you couple that with the amount of power and control that he had. I mean, one thing that's been implied in this trial yesterday was the fact that certain pieces of evidence disappeared from the LAPD that were destroyed without being signed off on. To me, it says without saying that he's paying people off in the LAPD. So who do you trust? Right? Anyways, it shows the pattern of violence, psychological abuse, and coercive control. Just again. Then let's talk about something. This is going to be a little graphic, guys. So I'll give you a trigger warning. We're going to talk about blood a little bit. So Mia then recounted a violent attack which Cassie was injured severely and began gushing, described as, quote, gushing blood. Gushing blood. According to Mia, this unfolded when she and Deontay Nash tried to intervene during one of Diddy's outbursts against Cassie. But Combs, she said, responded with immediate and violent force. He said he threw me against the wall, talking about her, so quick and easily, and I realized we were in real danger. Despite their efforts to defuse the situation, Combs allegedly threw Ventura onto the bed where her face hit the sharp corner, which results in that facial wound, which we've heard about before. She said, quote, she's just started gushing blood. She just started gushing blood. And rather than seeking medical help through the standard channels, Combs allegedly tried to cover up the assault. Mia said he instructed her to call a friend who had a connection to a doctor and lie about what happened. Say Cass was drunk and hit her head. That's what Diddy instructed her to say. So this is telling his people to lie to cover up his abuse. This goes into that whole, But anyways. So this, again, shows this pattern of violence, manipulation, coercion, concealment that everybody in his life. And when you try to intervene, this shows what happens to you as well. And he would just lie about what happened. And because of this, this is why he was able to get away with it for so long. But Mia's describing physical brutality and shows how he uses his influence to rewrite the narrative in order so that he avoids accountability. Now, throughout her time on the stand, she's described a world marked by fear, marked by control, where even employees trying to protect others were allegedly met with violence. Employees and victims were denied truth and safety in the aftermath. In earlier testimony, she recalled another incident in which Cassie was found crying and hiding behind the bush. We talked about that earlier. After he threw her belongings off a second-floor balcony. This allegation shows that Combs not only injured Cassie, but directed others to lie about it, which again shows the prosecution's claim that this abuse wasn't occasional or spontaneous, but it was systematic and protected by a network of enablers. And that, again, my friends, is where you have this racketeering stuff coming in, because he was using his business, his associates, to pay for some of this stuff, pay for the trafficking, hiding it from that, and using his employees in order to cover up these things that he was doing. That's what this is. So as I said to y'all at the beginning of this, when we started this, look, this is what we're showing. We're seeing domestic violence. I said, give it time. Give it time. We still have about 2 weeks left in this. Give it time. And we are definitely starting to see those building blocks come together. Now, let's talk about another one, because she talks about another. These are all separate violent outbursts that she's talking about today, okay? So she described a violent outburst at a private party that was hosted by Prince, okay? And real quick, I just want to address this. I've addressed this every time since this rumor's come out. There is no audio of Prince saying that if something happens to me, Diddy is behind it. That is completely false. It is fake. It is made, I think, with AI. It is not real. It is not accurate. It was never introduced in court. So please just know that. But something did happen at Prince's house. There was a violent outburst, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago, that basically Prince's security team had to physically stop it. So according to Mia, both she and Cassie attended this exclusive gathering without Diddy knowing. Mia said they had to sneak out knowing how controlling he could be, but their attempt at freedom was very short-lived. He caught up to Cassie and had her on the ground. The attack allegedly began before anyone could react until Prince's own private security intervened. It's like he started to attack her, but Prince's security swiftly intervened. No further physical harm was described in the courtroom testimony, but the incident kind of showed just how volatile he would be and how dangerous he could become so quickly, even in a high-profile public setting. Remember, this was not his house, right? He found out that she left, found out where she was, came to this house in a violent rage and in front of people threw her on the ground and started trying to hurt her until Prince's security, not Diddy's, Prince's security pulled him off of her. Right? It's insane. So then she testified that the head of human resources at Bad Boy informed her that she was being suspended without pay for being insubordinate after all this because she went out with Cassie. She said, I was in big trouble. The implication of that was basically that any behavior that challenged Diddy's control, even something as simple as attending a party, was grounds for retaliation. Even when he was the one accused of violence, his employees are the ones who bore the consequences. Mia's testimony, again, continues to reinforce this system of intimidation and manipulation and just honestly unchecked power, where he uses fear and retaliation to keep those around him in line and to keep them silent, even in the face of public violence at a high-profile event. So this show, I mean, think about this. This shows that his rage was so explosive that he could go into some like look, Diddy is big in the music industry. Prince is music royalty, right? To go into his house at his party, at his event, make a scene like this and have to have his people stop him. So in another testimony that talks about unchecked violence, fear, and desperation, Mia told them about a 2012 trip to Parrot Cay and Turks and Caicos. According to Mia, she and Cassie, fled from him twice that single trip. Once by barricading themselves in a room, and again by floating on paddleboards into the ocean to escape them. Let me repeat that, okay? During a trip at Parrot Cay and Turks and Caicos, they had to barricade themselves in a room, or float out into the middle of the ocean to get away from him. Think about that. Think about that. Anyway, I don't know. Somebody, you guys are talking about Andrew Tate over here. I will tell you guys something. I got on real quick. I'm going to pause. We'll get to the next section. I actually got on Andrew Tate's radar because he posted something on Facebook a while ago. I'll share this, and I thought I was funny, but I posted something. He posted a picture showing his daughters, because it's a shame that man has daughters, right? Saying that on $100 a month I can feed them, clothe them, blah 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 blah. And I said, so I made a comment. I said, yeah. I said, don't worry about it. There'll be no contact. By the time they're adults, there'll be no contact with you when they realize, the garbage human that you really are, something along those lines. It was way more eloquent and I think wittier than that. But he started messaging me, like trying to sway me to come to his side. Like, you should listen to what we have to say. We have this program. I'm like, dude, I've got no interest in anything you're offering. I'm a man who's an advocate for women and an advocate for girls, and there's no world where I'm going to join or listen to any of the shit you are spewing out of your mouth. So anyways, that's just my quick little, y'all, because I've seen it in YouTube and on Insta. You all are kind of talking about it. Absolutely not. Where men need to be helping to stop this type of violence and SA and I'd rather be on that side of history than the side that Andrew Tate is on. They got indicted again, but this is not about him. So let me continue on. So they escaped into the ocean, right? The first incident occurred late at night. Mia said she was jolted awake by Cassie, who burst into her room running and screaming, saying, "You got to help me. He's going to kill me." Ran and panicked. Mia then testified that the two of them acted quickly dragging furniture across the room to block the door outside. Combs was allegedly banging on the door and screaming in rage, trying to force his way in. The only way out was through a back door. Mia said they escaped into the night and ran barefoot down the beach to get away from him. But the ordeal didn't end there, because later in the trip, Mia said that both of them had to flee a second time, this time by paddling out into the ocean. They laid flat on paddleboards, hiding offshore, while Combs again raged on the beach, screaming in fury as he searched for them. She said, quote, "I was just trying to weigh whether it was scary to face Mother Nature or go back to Puff." That's what Mia told the jury. Eventually the weather turned and they had no choice but to return. not because the threat had passed, but because the elements forced them to choose between danger on land and danger at sea. So they chose to take the path of the more likely survival path, which was going back to land. When asked why she never reported these incidents to police, Mia gave the response, "I believe that Puff was above the police." And that is a common theme about this entire thing. This is not a hyperbole. Mia's statement is echoing what so many other witnesses have suggested, that Diddy's wealth, power, and far-reaching influence in the industry made him completely untouchable, even when the people around him feared for their lives. It didn't matter. Mia's testimony, I would say, is just as impactful as Cassie's, possibly more so, because you're looking at it from a perspective of an employee who witnessed it, an employee, not a girlfriend, not a partner, which makes it not just domestic violence anymore, right? So I feel like her testimony and everything she is sharing is so pivotal for this, and I'm glad that she's facing her fears to do this, because this stuff is, I mean, you couldn't make this up if you tried. You know what I'm saying? You couldn't make this up. Then in yet another revelation she talked about, she described an incident where Diddy forced party guests, including her, to take part in a substance guessing game at Burning Man. According to Mia, Combs laid out 3 piles of white powder in front of a group of people and told them each were something different. One was the white powdery stuff, one was Molly, one was ketamine. People were taking turns and playing some guessing games. The implication, she said, that was that guests were expected to snort one of the piles without knowing which substance they were taking. When Mia's turn, she said she became nervous and attempted to opt out, but Combs wouldn't let her. "He got close to my face and was upset that I didn't even just try to fake it." Mia testified she tried to fake a snort, but Combs noticed and then confronted her. So after he said, like, "I can't believe you wouldn't even try to fake it," she tried to fake it. Then he allegedly prepared a dose of himself and forced her to take it. So she had no choice but to comply, but then quickly tried to undo the damage. She said, "When I got away from him for a minute, I blew a lot of it out because I was so scared of watching what ketamine did to others." The story, again, shows kind of what he did. And again, this still builds into this whole racketeering thing. Now, keep in mind, at this point in this, she has testified to enduring physical assaults, sleepless stretches of labor, violence, emotional coercion, and now forced to take substances, which is just sheer recklessness and a public display of control, right? And this was not a private confrontation behind closed doors. You know, this was Burning Man, which is one of the most visible festivals in the world, a music festival with one of the most visible music artists and producers in the world. And yet, according to Mia, Combs still used that moment to exert power, intimidation, and forced substance use. Prosecutors are using Mia's testimony to show that Combs not just uses wealth to charm or control people, but he used fear, substances, and humiliation, oftentimes with an audience. And what she's kind of describing here, y'all, is a cult-like atmosphere of control and psychological, essentially, dominance that he would maintain not just in public settings, but in private settings as well. So then she talked about how he would get visibly high during professional and public appearances, including business board meetings and even a taping of Chelsea Handler's TV show. She said, there were a few times at the studio, and there were a handful of times that stuck out to me where I thought this was an inappropriate time. She specifically recalled 2 moments that made her uncomfortable, one during a formal boardroom setting, another just before he appeared on Chelsea Handler. One time was a board meeting. She said, quote, "One time was a board meeting. One time was going to the Chelsea Handler show. There were just a few times where I was like, oh gosh, when am I going to have to pull him to the side and say, you look a little crazy at the moment?" Now, Mia did not name the substances Combs allegedly used in those moments. Her testimony listed some allegations that pointed to a pattern of erratic behavior, again, back to that control, and again, back to that substance abuse. And the context in which she described these events wasn't just about that substance use. It was about the instability of being employed by someone who would just blur all boundaries together, including those between personal indulgence and public professionalism. So, I mean, think about everything that we've talked about so far. It's insane, right? You could not make this stuff up if you tried. Then let's talk about, this is going to get a little graphic, guys. I'll try to handle this one, kid gloves. Um, so she once recounted how Combs threw a bowl of spaghetti at her when she tried to retreat to her room to change a tampon. She said the incident occurred around 3 a.m. at his LA home where Mia was living at the time, because Diddy forced her to work for him. She told jurors that he ordered her to go get everybody, but as she turned to go to her room, she explained that she needed a moment of privacy. There was, quote, there was blood dripping down my leg, and I said, I'm on my period. I just need to change my tampon. But instead of allowing her to take a minute to herself, guess what he did? The thing that he seems to do best, which is flew into a rage. He said he went on a really humiliating rant in front of everybody. He said we needed to go now. That's when she said Combs, who was already holding a bowl of spaghetti, threw it at her, missing her by just a couple of feet. He immediately had a bowl of spaghetti in his hand and threw it at me and started aggressively cursing me out like I had to get the hell out of his house. But it didn't end with the flying spaghetti. He testified that he then chased her up the stairs, continuing to scream at her as others witnessed the scene. She was then she said she was then suspended without pay again following that incident, which was handed again down by the head of human resources at Bad Boy Entertainment, which shows how he retaliated. This is a woman who wanted to change her tape. This is a natural biological thing. And all she needed to do was go do this. And this is how he reacts. Right? So take a look at this. All right. Somebody's saying there's a bad comment going on. I'll take a look at this when we get toward the end of this. I have 30 minutes before I have a hard stop. So let me kind of take a look at this. Oh, yeah. 100% scars you for life. Then she talks about the first time he allegedly the first time he allegedly SA'd her, which was just months after she'd begun working for him in 2009. The setting was his 40th birthday party at the Plaza Hotel's penthouse suite. A second, real quick. All right, guys, give me a second. All right, sorry. Yeah, fine. Oh, sorry. So I'm talking to Anna Maria, who is with the Menendez brothers thing tonight. So she texted me real quick. Sorry about that. So this happened at Combs' 40th birthday party. That's what happens when we're live, guys. At the 40th birthday plaza at the house suite. Okay. According to Mia, the encounter began under the guise of praise. Combs called her into the penthouse kitchen during the party, cleared everyone out, and began complimenting her work. She recalled that he poured 2 shots to toast his birthday. He told me what a great job I was doing, but the drink, she said, hit her unusually hard. What happened next, she described as sudden and unwanted. He put his arm next to my head against the wall and leaned in to kiss me. He put his other hand up the side of my dress. Mia said she did not want to be kissed or be touched, but she didn't know how to stop it. She remembers nothing after that moment until she woke up sitting alone in the meeting room in the penthouse with no memory of how she got there. I'm going to pause there for a quick moment, simply for the fact to say that this is the stuff. This is one of the first times we have heard talking about the lace drinks in the federal trial. But we've heard the same MO a lot in the civil lawsuits about he has a drink and you don't remember anything after that. So, anyways, no memory of how she got there. Now, Mia said that incident marked the beginning of what she described as sporadic SAs that occurred throughout her 8-year employment with him from 2009 to 2017. While she continued to work for him publicly, she said the private dynamic became one defined by power, fear, and control. He was my boss. He was a very powerful person. He was to me. He's younger than my dad, but I looked at him like an older adult. He was the boss or the king, a very powerful person. And despite her growing closeness with Cassie, Mia testified that she never told Cassie about the assaults. The silence she implied was born from fear of both professional consequences and personal disbelief. Mia testimony, there's part important. I think we talked about this. Now, her firsthand account of this first alleged assault adds credibility to the broader claims of this abuse that we've heard about and sets the tone for how early and how quietly the abuse kind of begun under her employment. Now, the Plaza Hotel birthday celebration, the toast, all of it wrapped up in glamour and status, but beneath the surface, It was the beginning of nearly a decade of violation, coercion, and silence. Then let's talk about another one of those. Okay. Um, this one was very emotional and gut wrenching for her. When she took the stand on this part, she was in tears. She recounted waking up in her bedroom to find Diddy allegedly on top of her, R-ing her. Remember, she was living in his home at that point in the early years of his employment. She would not allow her to lock the door. He forbade it, which left her completely vulnerable. She said, then one night, the worst happened. I woke up to the weight of a person on top of me. That person, she said, was Sean Combs. It happened so fast. Using one hand to get his pants or whatever off. I remember it was sort of like him telling me, shh. Mia then described herself as frozen, terrified, confused, ashamed, and scared. She did not fight back. She did not scream. She just shut down. When the prosecutor asked if she had wanted to have relations with Combs, Mia was sobbing on the stand when this happened. And she said, no. The courtroom remained silent, and her voice was trembling. She was sobbing. She was visibly anguished. She laid out the moments that she said that Combs violated not only her body, but her trust, autonomy, and sense of safety. This is challenging testimony to hear, but important to hear. Because he dominated the women around him, and he did that through power, influence, and physical control. And it didn't matter whether you were somebody he was interested in romantically or you were an employee of his. It was anybody who depended on him for housing, for income, for just being able to exist. Mia's experience, as she described it, was not a misunderstanding or a blurred boundary. It was full on R, a word that sounds like great. Committed by a man that she worked for, lived under, and feared. She just wasn't safe. Then she talked about how she felt like trash and describes another essay. So she says that she was doing a very mundane task, helping Diddy pack for a trip. She told jurors that she was sitting on the floor of his closet, assisting him with preparing for travel, when Sean Combs suddenly and without warning forced her to perform oral on him. She said she felt like trash, scared, and ashamed, like an idiot. The incident, she said, was not isolated. It was one of several times during her employment from 2009 to 2017 when Combs allegedly essayed her and R'd her. But this particular moment stood out for its blunt cruelty and emotional aftermath. She said there was no pretext, no coercion, masked seduction, just an abrupt violation of trust and bodily autonomy. In the middle of a routine task in a space where Mia was supposed to be doing her job, he forces himself on her in this way. I mean, think about everything that this woman has talked about just today, and she hasn't had a full day, right? We're not even done. Let's talk about why she never said no. Because they asked, she explained why she never explicitly said no to the man who did this to her repeatedly. And she said this, was what the answer came down to one word. One word. Y'all know what that word is? Power. That word is power. She said, I knew his power and I knew his control over me. I didn't want to lose everything that I worked so hard for in this world. That was the only thing that I had anymore. She emphasized to the jurors that she never once wanted to sleep with him, but her silence was not consent. It was just survival. And we've heard that before from victims and survivors, that their body goes into a, people say that there's flight or fight, but there's actually one more. It's freeze, flight, or flight. And in this case, she froze as a moment of self-preservation. That's what she had to do. And I swear, for guys who are watching this later, because there's always one of you. There's always one of y'all that comes on and defends him. I dare you. Come at me after this testimony. I will blast you. I will do further than that. Not only will I blast you, you better hope there's nothing I can find that's identifying about you, because I will flat out put everything I can find about you out there for who you are. Don't even try to justify this. That's not a threat, it's a promise. Anyways, I get tired of people like that, guys. Sorry. But this is basically, it was survival. That's what she told them, that she had to deal with it. She felt that she couldn't say no. She had no ability to stop what was happening. She feared losing everything that she had fought for, her job, proximity to success, the hard-won reputation, her connections, all could vanish like that I can do better than that. Like that. With one word, one phone call from him, everything she built in her life could be gone. Be gone. And that control is what prosecutors allege is central to the racketeering and trafficking case that they have. That it's not about just about force. It's about creating an environment where victims feel they have no way out, where they have no way out. And people can sit here who have never been victims of abuse, have never been in this situation. None of us have ever been in a, even if you've been abused, none of us have ever been in a situation, very few of us, I should say, have never been in a situation where somebody has the power, influence, and stretch that John Diddy Combs has, right? Even if you've been in a very similar situation, you've never been in that situation. Never been in that situation. So anyways, that's kind of why when people come on and say, well, I would have left, I would have done this. You don't know that. You're not in that situation. You have hindsight. You have the gift of knowing what happened after the fact. You don't know what it's like to be in that. Right? You don't know. And I think that this is something that we really need to have more discussion and more education about. Not on this particular live or this podcast, but I think this is something that we need to talk more about and that people need to understand. And we really, more men, if you're men who are watching this, more men need to educate other men about this because there's a lot of stuff out there that they don't quite understand. So anyways, I think too, there's the last thing I say about this, that Mia's words kind of are our chilling reminder of how abuse doesn't always look like a scream or a struggle. Sometimes it just looks like frozen silence in the face of overwhelming power. And that silence, as Mia made very clear, was not consent. It was not agreement. It was fear. It was fear. She said, I didn't want to lose everything. She repeated that to the court. She didn't want to lose everything. Now, jurors listened to all of this in complete silence. All of this. While she took the stand again and shared the painful calculus behind her decision to never report the essay. She said that it was that the reasons weren't just personal, that they were systemic. It felt controlled. He had so much power. He was prone to violent rage. She feared what would happen if she spoke out, not only what Diddy might do to her, but what the entertainment industry might do without him. She told jurors she was terrified of being blacklisted, shut out of an industry where careers hinged on connections and reputations, and her, she feared, would not survive a public accusation against a man like Diddy. But perhaps even more disturbing was her belief that law enforcement wouldn't believe her, or worse, wouldn't care. Mia told the court about a traffic stop years ago that cemented that fear. She'd been pulled over while speeding to get to work for Diddy. Her license had lapsed. She panicked, terrified that being late or losing her license would trigger his rage. In a moment of desperation, she dropped Combs' name. She said, it was the only time I name dropped. The female police officer did not, listen to this. This is important. The female police officer didn't ask for any further verification. Instead, she asked for proof. So Mia handed over her phone and put Combs on the phone. The second I handed the phone and started laughing, she started laughing, saying, oh my God, Puff Daddy, I love you. Just this whole excited conversation. And then she let her go. No ticket, no warning, just a celebrity worship, fangirling kind of thing going on, right? From a cop whose job was supposed to be impartial enforcement of the law, right? That moment, Mia explained, reinforced her belief that Combs was untouchable, not just to her, but to everyone, including the people who were supposed to protect women like her. Throughout her testimony, she has painted a picture of life inside Diddy's orbit that has been dominated by fear, manipulation, control, or substance uses, SA, and so many more things. It was a place where silence was survival, and speaking up meant you could lose everything. He was too powerful, and she was too alone. And I want to put this out there too. Cassie's story, her story, is a stark reminder of the invisible barriers that survivors face, even when they know that something is wrong, even when they want to tell someone, even when they are desperate for help. These are the barriers that so many victims face, so many survivors face. But for Mia and perhaps many, many others, the system never looked like a safe place. It looked like a fan club, one that protected the star and not the other people. Anyways, she's back on the stand tomorrow, guys. I do this a lot, right? I talk about a lot of really horrible things. Today, this one kind of gets to me a little bit emotionally, right? This is tough. This is a tough conversation. And it's an important conversation, which is why we can't shy away from it. Not only because even if I wasn't covering the Diddy trial on a daily basis, this is still stuff that I would talk about because it's important. And I hope that there are people who might have thought differently about what this kind of stuff looks like, maybe sees it from a different lens when you hear about why these people couldn't do what they couldn't do. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, but I have a feeling it's going to be just as emotionally charged, maybe even more. But to me, this testimony is just as, if not possibly more powerful than Cassie's. So it's horrible to think how many people are victims of this, right? Now, that being said, guys, that's our show for the day. That's what we have. Of course, make sure to follow on all platforms: Facebook, Insta, YouTube, what am I saying? Facebook, TikTok. Because that's a free thing that you can do that really helps support my content, and it goes a long way, a lot more than you know. And everybody who is giving gifts, because I know we've hit a gift goal on TikTok. Thank you guys so much for that. I appreciate y'all. In about 15 minutes from now, I will be going live with Anna Maria Baralt, who is the spokesperson and cousin for the Menendez brothers. You have seen her on TV. You have seen her on GMA. Multiple interviews. And here's the thing. You guys can bring questions. If there are questions about the Menendez case, about the resentencing, about other things, about their abuse, their assault, because that's the thing. I'm going from one conversation about S abuse to another conversation of S abuse in 15 minutes, just one that ended up in the survivors of that S abuse committing an absolutely horrific and heinous act that has landed them in prison for their entire lives. And so you guys can bring questions if you have them, and you should bring questions if you have them, because they're important. And as long as they are respectful and they're not family or me, you're allowed to ask them, even if it's a tough or taboo question. So that being said, for those of y'all watching, we'll see you over on TikTok in about 15 minutes. If you are not watching this on TikTok or can't come over, my goal is to get the interview downloaded and put on YouTube probably by tomorrow at the latest, possibly even tonight. So with that said, everybody, have a great night. It's going to be right here, Becca, in about 15 minutes. You can register for the live in my profile. But I will see you guys very soon. Thank you all for coming. Thank you guys for sitting through this. These are important conversations, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye, everyone.